Welcome to One-on-One. I'm Greg Bassey, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. It's a big day here at PAC 14. The superintendent of schools is in the house. Welcome to Dr. Donna Hanlin. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So when we planned this interview, my strategy for what you would be talking about was begging the county council and the county executive to please put in their budget enough money to fund the schools. The first hurdle has been cleared. The county executive has fully funded the school board's budget for the first time that anyone can remember. So you have no argument there with him at least. So what is your strategy now?
Well, first of all, I am so grateful that County Executive Culver has provided full funding based upon our request. And now we move forward with that request to the county council. I've always felt like we had the support of the county council, but we won't take anything for granted. We want to make sure that the council has a clear understanding of why that funding is being requested, how it ties to Imagine 2022, and very specific initiatives that are part of that strategic plan.
Now, I know you won't take any credit, but it seems to me that what you have done is outlined what you wanted to do. You've set measurements for achieving what you want to do, and you've put a price tag on those things, and people seem to understand your mission and want to support it.
Well, that's strategic planning. And I think it's very important that, as I've been saying since I've been here, that we're not going forward just asking for a lump sum of money without that specific plan. So that was part of my my mission from the very beginning, to determine what it is we were going to be about, starting with the vision points down to the strategic plan, with very specific requests that were understandable and that the community understands and can get behind. And so, yes, it has been a strategic plan that I have led the school system in, but it's been a lot of credit goes to the staff, and a great deal of credit goes to the community who have gotten behind Imagine 2022.
You've picked three kind of obvious things, I think, and that helps. Mm-hmm. One is the pre-kindergarten.
Correct.
To have these kids ready when they report to school. Do you want to talk about that some more?
Sure. We're continuing with that goal in mind. Very, very critically important that students enter our kindergarten classes ready to learn, and there's a lot of research behind why that is from birth about what's happening in children's brains as those brains are developing, and how it impacts their ability to learn once they enter school. So the earlier we can make sure that they have high quality experiences, whether it's in our pre-kindergarten classrooms or in other high quality experiences, we just want to make sure that students are entering our classrooms ready to learn. So we want to make sure that options are available for parents should they choose to send their students to our pre-kindergarten classrooms. So we started last year by adding 5 additional classrooms. For next year, we're adding 3 more. And we'll just continue to build based upon what the needs are of the community, and to make sure that students are entering ready to learn.
And I think it helps too for the people who say, well, we're just going to pay for babysitting and that kind of stuff, and people who wonder whether it works. You just point down the road to Somerset County, they had it implemented, and they've had tremendous results.
They have. They're in the top 6, well above the state average in the assessment that we use to determine if students are ready for kindergarten. And like I said, they are in the top 6. They've been doing great things in Somerset County, and it does point to the success of early programs.
The second element you chose was the graduation rate. You could have picked a million things that we're sort of deficient in. You picked that one. That's the top line idea, to try to graduate more kids. How's that going to go?
Right. Well, you can imagine that there's lots of things that we can do within that goal to make sure that students are graduating from high school. We are moving slightly in that area in terms of our results. We have a lot more work to do in that area, making sure that students stay engaged in our high schools. So we're doing things to address some of our more non-traditional learners, from online learning and expanded alternative programs. We're also looking at, as you know, we added last year a STEM Academy. That's just the beginning of what we're trying to do in all of our secondary schools, with making sure that students are have opportunities to be engaged in areas that they can become passionate about, or that they are passionate about. I'm really excited about the future possibility of a School for the Arts. That's part of increasing that graduation rate, because research has shown that the arts have a great deal of power in terms of engaging students in their educational process. A School for the Arts wouldn't just be about preparing students to go on and be performers, but that they build their creativity, communication skills, collaboration, and I've seen the success of an art school firsthand. So a lot of different strategies there. Another big focus in that area for next year, that's part of Imagine 2022, has to do with supporting students' social, emotional, and behavioral needs. As the community knows, we have students who are entering our schools or who are in our schools who have significant issues in terms of those needs, and we want to make sure that we have the resources to work with them and make sure that we can educate them to the best of our abilities. So that's the big focus with social workers and other resources that will support those needs.
Yeah, it frustrates me that so many of my readers that I deal with on the phone don't understand. Their attitude is, with discipline in the schools, Dr. Hanlin just needs to buy a bigger paddle, is their
Right.
solution for this.
Right.
But it's not. You need these social workers,
We
these
do.
counselors, these psychiatrists to deal with these kids who have problems, to prevent them from spilling out into the hallways.
That's exactly right. I mean, we do follow the code of conduct and discipline students accordingly, but we would prefer to prevent those issues from happening in the first place. So by providing interventions earlier and to a greater degree, we may be able to prevent some of those discipline issues from happening in the first place.
For so long, people heard teachers stand up at the public hearings and, we need more money. That was their solution to every education problem, so it seemed. You have an element in that in terms of recruiting and attracting teachers to the county, keeping teachers in place, keeping them from spilling out to Worcester County that pays a little bit more, gives them free laptops, stuff like that. That's part of your initiative too. How's that going?
It is. It's going well. I feel like, at least over the course of the last couple of years that I'm familiar with, we've had less trouble attracting. So we're still focused on that. We're doing things like our own recruitment fairs. We're really focused on making sure that we have a diverse group of teachers in our schools working with our students. So we're recruiting at historically black colleges and universities. So we are still doing things in terms of recruitment, because there's definitely a teacher shortage, and we need to be addressing that. But when we start our school year, we are typically, at least anecdotally in conversations with other superintendents, we're starting full staffed typically. It's retaining teachers. We're seeing some improvement in that area. We're tracking those data, but it is about teacher salary, but it's also about supporting teachers in the classroom. And by adding those resources to address students' social, emotional, and behavioral needs, I'm hoping that'll also help with teacher retention, because they'll feel like, wow, I can really teach here. This is what I want to do. I want to teach. I'm not going to have to be as involved in student discipline if we're able to address it with greater resources. So lots of different strategies in that area to retain teachers here.
Someone made a point recently that I never thought of, that Wicomico has been lucky historically because Salisbury University was Salisbury Teachers College for so long, and there were automatically teachers in the community who could just go right into our local school system. But now the mission of the university has changed a lot, and they're not producing as many teachers.
I don't know if it's as much that the mission of the university has changed, but definitely fewer young people are going into teacher education, and
Yeah.
so they are producing fewer graduates, especially at the secondary level. An example, there were no secondary teacher education graduates mid-year this year, which is very unusual. We're often, if we have someone who's left us during the year, we will often watch for those December graduates to see how can we fill that classroom early rather than waiting until the next year. But there weren't any secondary. And even the number of young men and women who are going into elementary is greatly declined. So Maryland is an import state in terms of teacher education, and while we have teacher education programs right here in our backyard, it's still an issue. When you're interning or you're a student teacher, you're not getting that same experience when you can set the tone yourself
Yeah.
in a classroom.
And I just remember being a parent sitting at assemblies in Salisbury Middle School for pageants or plays or musical events, and the energy from the kids that they were exuding, the fidgeting and the movement, and just the energy in that room is completely different than any other room. So those kids are literally like growing an inch while you're sitting there next to them.
They are. And one day they're an elementary student with those kinds of behaviors, and the next day they're a high school student with those kinds of behaviors. So they're growing hormonally, and it is a challenging time.
Now, you talk about your art school. My kid, again, was in the arts program, and I was always fascinated that his high school experience was so different than mine. He would leave in the morning excited about an art project he was working on, working with his teacher, working with the other kids, the teamwork and all that. Where when I was in school, I was just like, I need to get B's if I'm going to get into college. It was a completely different mission motive stress than what he had. He really enjoyed what he was doing. He was learning in what he was doing. And I was just repeating back what the teacher said to me in terms of what my learning was. Yeah. He was going to get into college anyway. It was never a question. But back then, I had to work really hard to get into college. Right. It's completely changed. And I think it's just great that administrators have figured out that the schools need to do things differently to motivate kids.
That's right. So it's not, young folks in high school especially still don't know what they want to do necessarily in future careers. So having academies in our schools or an art school or signature programs, whatever we want to call them, isn't about having them determine earlier what careers might be, but for them to be able to explore areas where they believe they have an interest, something that excites them, is going to be quite different than what you're describing as your experience or even my experience when I was in high school, where I didn't have those opportunities.
And I see the effects of that peripherally in like Destination Imagination. Our school system always does really well in that, which is a thinking, learning, doing, creative exercise.
It is. It is. That's a wonderful example of the kinds of instruction that I believe is not just going on after school, but we have that going on in many of our classrooms where it's more hands-on and what I call authentic learning, where they're solving real-world problems. So yes, we just had 4 teams go on to we just learned that we have 4 teams going on to the global finals. So once again, great success in that area.
That's terrific. I do watch the school board meetings, shockingly, on TV, and I saw that you added 2 days this year to the calendar for snow days.
Yes.
So we'll be going to school through the 14th this year. We
will be going to school through the 14th. Glad we didn't have that 3rd day, or we would have been converting a March day, to a regular school day. That date is already passed, and I think we're past the window of snow at this point. But yes, our last day will be the 14th.
Which leads to a scheduling question. Under the Hogan mandate, schools would have had to have ended by the 15th. Now the General Assembly has its own measure that's going to pass. It's been passed. The governor vetoed it. It was overridden. So now it'll be up to the school boards to set the opening date. So I know you're not going to answer this question, but which do you prefer, opening in August or September?
Gosh. Well, I'm going to give you the the answer that we, as we do every year, we listen to the community and what they believe is important in terms of a school calendar. Obviously, I then go to the board with a recommendation. I don't know yet. Obviously, it gives us greater flexibility. I know that we have young men and women who probably work in Ocean City in the tourism industry, and I want to be cognizant of that. Our community may very well say, we want to continue to go to start school after Labor Day. And quite frankly, I haven't had that specific conversation with our board yet, because we received the mandate, we knew what we needed to do. So now that we have a change based upon the legislation, we will be having those conversations, and we'll be, as we are considering future calendars, going back and revisiting what's best for Wicomico County.
A political question, I shouldn't ask it, but John Andes was a friend down in Worcester for a lot of years. And when they implemented the elected school board down there, he said, I'll stay around a year, but I'm not going to work with elected people. It's just not worth it. And of course, he went on for 10 more years with, with an elected board. People predicted kind of the same thing for Wicomico, that the elected board would choose stuff, but they seem to be lambs around you. What's going on?
I think it's all about communication. It really is all about communication, and I do my very best to keep our board members informed, to respond to their questions. We are in contact with one another, not just at board meetings, but I send a weekly update to the board every week, and I'm on and off the phone or texting with them to respond to questions, making sure they're aware of what's going on in the schools. I really think it's communication, and I believe that's why I continue to receive their support.
Social networking has been kind of a hindrance from time to time in terms of good communication. I know you probably spend more time dealing with social networking situations than you would probably like. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think obviously social media can be a very positive thing. We use it in the school system to publicize the great things that are happening in our schools, but it can be frustrating when we have student issues that arise because of arguments that arise over Facebook or whatever the social media is, the platform is that students are using. And then when adults get involved by spreading rumors that may or may not be true, rather than going straight to the school and talking with the school administrators about what it is they're hearing. We've been talking a lot about see something, say something, and making sure that students understand that the most responsible thing that they can do if they hear something that is happening in a school that could be dangerous or unproductive in any way, that they go and tell a trusted adult rather than spreading something on social media. So it's a challenge. We just continue to try to address it as best we can.
And the thing, well, for a long time, the tactic was to ignore it, and you don't do that.
I'm not engaged on social media personally. We don't ignore it. We attempt to, if we can learn who the individual is who's expressing concern on social media, we reach out to them individually, not through social media necessarily. Or if it is a serious enough and widespread enough situation, then our communications office will make a statement on social media or on our Facebook page, setting the record straight about what's happening.
Usually most of the concerns in that area are security. People worry about it a lot.
Right.
I'm sure you worry about it a lot.
I do, and I understand their worry, and we just do the best we can to make sure that we have all the safety measures in place that we can possibly have in place. And then again, communication. I can't stress that enough, that if adults or children are hearing something that has them concerned, they need to say something.
I think the county executive, Bob Culver's, kind of evolved in his thinking and attitude over his time in leadership. He's making the point now that even though the county hasn't always done all it could perhaps to help the school system in terms of operational funding, we do a great job in terms of capital funding, building great buildings.
Right.
And there's two big projects, there's more than two, but there's two big projects on your board right now. Beaver Run, a new elementary school at Beaver Run, and the changes that are going to happen at Mardella. First, tell me what the plan is for Beaver Run.
So Beaver Run, we're getting ready to go into construction documents, or we're actually in the midst of designing construction documents, and we hope to break ground, I believe it's sometime in 2020, the first part of 2020, I believe. So we've been through the process of the feasibility study and the design documents and other things, getting input from the community. It's very, very exciting. It's going to be there on Beaver Run's property, but a state-of-the-art facility designed based upon input from the community. So very, very excited about that. And when we do complete that school, our Wicomico Early Learning Center will become part of Beaver Run Elementary School. So they'll become one school. In terms of Mardella Middle and High School, we just completed the feasibility study where the architects came back to first the community and then the School Building Commission and the school board with 4 design options. And ultimately the design that was selected was option 3, which is a major renovation, addressing the systemic issues that are present there, but also providing for additional instructional space there in Mardella on that site. So option 4 was a new school, and it probably would have meant not there on that site, and
Right.
the community spoke very clearly that that was not something they were in favor of. So we will be moving forward. Appreciate the support that we're receiving again from the county executive in terms of moving forward with Mardella Middle and High School. So that's, I believe, if everything stayed on course, we're looking at probably 2023 by the time we actually start construction there. But at least it's in the works.
Right, and there's been some good and appreciated work in Mardella with the gym and with the track. They have a new track.
Yes, that's true. That's evolved since I've been here with the construction of the track in the back, and I know how appreciative the community has been for the new track.
Now, there are those of us who are still in therapy from the fighting about Bennett Middle School,
Okay.
having to cover that and attending those meetings and the back and forth, and the conspiracy theories and all the other stuff. And we were all like ready for the same argument with Beaver Run. We were getting ready to dig in and have the Beaver Run fight. There's no fight.
There isn't a fight. I believe, I wasn't here.
Right.
I wasn't here for Bennett Middle, but I have heard those stories, and I can't imagine that the county executive or whoever made those decisions weren't there in the school seeing what
He was on the
we were
county
dealing.
council at the time.
Yeah. But I remember the day that we walked Mr. Culver and his team through Beaver Run and showed them some of the issues that we have in the school as it exists now. And it was shortly after that he determined that he would move forward with that funding. There may have been more involved in his decision making than that, but I was just very pleased and grateful that he determined to move forward with that, and seems to be very supportive of our construction projects. So.
Well, and even when he toured it, it had been greatly improved. You've got, I think, one of your best principals out there, Kirk Twilley. I guess he's still there.
He is still there.
You guys had fixed the courtyard, but there was no air conditioning except in the gymnasium and the cafeteria. It really was not, it was a substandard school.
Right. A lot of water issues,
Yeah.
flooding issues.
They were drinking water out of the,
Yes.
they had to have bottled water because the water was so bad there.
Yeah. So I think that was pretty obvious.
Right. And even Mardella, they win the Comptroller's Award every year for maintaining and keeping the school together with duct tape, I think, in a lot of ways. But the staff there, the maintenance staff, is completely committed to keeping that thing going. And it's a 65-year-old building.
I'm not sure of that off the top of my head, but I know it has some age, and it was time. So we're actually, I mentioned the feasibility study. The next step is actually the state approval of that feasibility study. So that's been submitted, and we're anxiously awaiting that, but then we'll be moving forward with that as well. So.
What's the plan for the old school board building there on Long Avenue? I know the county executive had an idea for it. You guys are in rented space now. Right. Is there a plan for all this?
Right now, it's working well for us. We have offices in 101 Long Avenue is how we refer to it. We have our Birth to Five program. We also have our planning and construction offices, our food service offices, and that's where we hold our school board meetings still, because that's where our auditorium is. So even though we have great space out at Northgate, we still need the space at 101 Long Avenue.
We're in Achieve 3.0?
3.0.
What's Achieve 4.0 look like?
Oh,
Can I have the scoop?
Well, I don't have the scoop for you yet, except to tell you that I believe strongly, and I know you were at State of the Schools when I talked about the Flywheel Concept and moving forward with the same momentum.
Which, by the way, hit with me, and I would recommend everyone read this. We'll put the link up so you can read about this.
Right.
As someone who's worked in a big machine in my life, I've always felt like a cog. So the idea of being a flywheel, that's aspirational for me. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, so that's Colin's Good to Great
Yes.
work, and he has this concept of the flywheel where you find what works, basically, and you keep that momentum going until it gains momentum and starts to expand exponentially, so that it's got its own momentum by continuing with the course. And so I can't imagine that Achieve 4.0 will be any different in terms of the three major priorities: making sure students enter our kindergarten classes ready to learn, making sure we graduate students from high school, and making sure we have the best staff in place, that we're recruiting and retaining a high-performing workforce.
Who can not get behind that?
Exactly. Now, we may be tweaking some of the strategies
Sure.
in terms of that strategic plan in 4.0, but yes, we will continue, we will stay the course.
It feels like the business community has stepped up to help you in terms of lobbying for money. What can the rest of us do, parents do? What can we do to make your all's job easier, teachers and administrators at the school system?
Well, the first thing that pops into my mind, and it's something that's part of the mission of the Education Foundation, the Wicomico County Education Foundation, is just this idea of advocacy. That when you're hearing good things about what's happening in the school system, being a spokesperson for those good things. We can always use volunteers in our schools, we can always use additional substitutes and things like that, but advocacy for the great things that are happening is, to me, the biggest thing that our community can do. And sometimes it's advocacy for resources, which is what we've seen with many individuals and organizations in the community who I believe had a huge bearing on the fact that we received funding above maintenance of effort. The Education Foundation, the Greater Salisbury Committee, the Chamber of Commerce, working behind the scenes. The community's behind it. And then this year we had a parent group,
Right.
Push for Education,
Right.
who
They came in late,
it was
but they were heard.
grassroots, and they asked some questions, some factual questions of me and Bruce Ford, our Chief Finance and Operations Officer, to make sure they had their facts correct. And then they just took the bull by the horns. I don't know whether they reached their number of signatures yet, but I know they were very close at the time of the county executive's hearing, and I'm sure they're still working towards that before we go to the county council. So.
And I think communication is important too. I think parents need to be involved in that.
Yes.
One of the things we used to do when my son was in high school, Steve Grutis was the principal, and he would do the Sunday night call. This is what's going on at the school. And we would put on the voicemail and then sit down together as a family and listen to it.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And he would say, here's what's on the Clipper clipboard, and everything that was going on.
Yes.
So my son knew that we knew what was going on in school.
That's great.
And that we were paying attention, and I think it helped motivate him. I think it was a really good tool for parents, a simple tool for parents to use.
Right. We still do that. Most principals do the Sunday night message with, the most important things that are going on in the school, but I love that idea that you're sitting down with making sure that your son or daughter knows that you're aware too. So that's great.
She's Dr. Donna Hanlin. She's taken our community by storm in the last 4 years.
This is the end of the third.
3 years. And we're looking forward to seeing how her budget plays out with the county council going
Greg.
through here in May and June. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
I'm Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent Newspaper. Another edition of 101 right here on PAC 14.
First Shore Federal is proud to support PAC 14 and one-on-one. We'd encourage every business to support PAC 14 and pick a program and support it, and let's make a difference.